Thank you, everybody, for joining us. My name's Laura Wigglesworth, and I'm a senior advisor at Callings. And today's topic is called Get Found. And it's all about this new notion of semantic search. So thank you for joining us. Today, my co-host is Wayne Rainey. He's a seasoned recruiter and a blogger and a professional coach and a frequent commentator on the job market. So, our webinar today is about something that is quietly shaping your job search, whether you realize it or not. And it's how to get found. Because the reality is that you're no longer just applying for jobs, you're being searched for by bots, AI tools, and recruiters. So, just a quick note about our background. Wayne and I together have more than half a century combined experience in recruiting. So, what does that mean? It means that when we started recruiting, the world was very different. And when we first started searching for people, we used a Rolodex. And I swear, I will kill anybody who posts in the chat, what is a Rolodex? Because that term dates us. It will, and if you don't know what that is, don't tell me about it. But it's what we used to do to keep track of people. We then moved to spreadsheets, eventually to LinkedIn, and then we learned Boolean. So Boolean is and was the algebra behind the internet. So it was how we go about matching keywords. So in those days, if your resume said program manager and the recruiter searched for program manager, you showed up. And if you didn't, then you were invisible. So like if you called yourself, I'm the director of first impressions, and the recruiter searched for receptionist, you didn't come up in the search. But that's not how it works anymore. So today, the systems behind hiring, that is LinkedIn and applicant tracking systems, and the newer tools are using something called semantic search. And here's the simplest way to understand that. Instead of matching exact words, these systems are understanding meaning. So they're forming impressions. And yesterday I was talking to Philippe, our chief technology officer, and I was asking him, so can you break this down for me? I'm not sure I still understand it. And he said, well, you're a recruiter by training. You've done recruiting for so long. You recruit using semantic search. And he said, if I give you a resume, how do you go about making sense of it? And I said, well, I form these impressions. I look at somebody and within 1 minute on paper, I say, well, this person isn't ready to be the global director of vaccine development. They're just ready to maybe lead a project in one country or two countries. And he said, why do you form that impression? And I said, well, I can explain it because they've only worked in two countries. And so going from two countries to going to global is too big of a jump. He said, that's the way semantic search works. So instead of searching for a program manager, now a recruiter might use the same thinking in a search they post when they say, find me someone who has led a global health program in Africa with vaccine experience. And in semantic search, the system will return people who have director of immunization, malaria vaccine implementation lead, vaccine delivery manager. So even though those exact words don't appear on the person's, don't appear in your search, they will bring forth those kinds of resumes. So I know that this is quite sophisticated, breaking your resume and profile into lots and lots of signals and patterns, but this is what's being done on the internet today and in the minds of recruiters. So basic rule of thumb, instead of thinking just about keywords, am I using all the right words? Do I have the right titles? Think in terms of concepts and the impressions that you're creating. It's basically your professional story. So before I introduce Wayne and turn it over to him, I want to make one thing clear. So keyword search is not dead. We're in this transition moment when both systems exist. So you don't have to choose one or the other. You can position yourself for both. And that's what Wayne's going to talk about today. So I turn it over now to Wayne Rainey, who's going to share some slides and break this down even further so you can understand what's going on here in the internet now, and then how do you change and adapt your resume, your cover letters, the way you position yourself online to be more competitive. And then at the end, in the last 20 minutes or so, I'm going to come back and show you the Callings platform and specifically the tools that we incorporate semantic search with. That is, how to find jobs and how to shape your resume and your cover letters. So, Wayne, over to you.
Laura, thank you so much. And I appreciate you and the team at Collins inviting me to come to speak with everyone today. And I also want to thank each and every attendee. We're getting, quite a few folks from all over the place. And so that's really awesome. We recognize, that's myself, Laura, and the team at Collins. We recognize that you have choices to make and how you spend your time. And we're thrilled to death that you're taking the time to spend with us here today. So why don't we go ahead and get started? I think that the key thing to look at is hiring systems are at that fork in the road that Laura mentioned. But hiring systems truly have always been at a fork in the road. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of stuff that you guys have my permission to use for your next pub trivia night. The very first resume was done in 1482. Leonardo da Vinci sent it to the Duke of Milan. And it essentially was a letter sort of extolling why Leonardo would be a really great fit. Does that sound like something right? And then all of a sudden, let's really jump ahead in time. Let's take a look at after World War II. Resumes, or CVs as they were called, were really the tool of the academics and the elite to be able to look for opportunities. But after World War II, a lot of people entered the workforce. And so we needed a way for people to distinguish themselves. So really the resume then started to take shape in the late 40s, early 50s. And then let's move ahead to the 1980s, so three some odd decades later. Now, all of a sudden, we as recruiters, so Laura and I, we were first blessed with our very first applicant tracking system in the early 1980s. So we've always been at a fork in the road. In the early days, it was humans creating information for other humans to use to consider them. And then about in the 1980s, as I mentioned, we needed to start writing for machines because it was machines that were looking for us first. And now we move ahead to semantic search. And semantic search, as Laura pointed out, it's really pattern recognition. It's not just matching words, it's looking for meaning. Now, we are at this inflection point. We are at this fork in the road. You can't control what system, reads you, but you can write something that appeals to both. And so here's the deal. I know it feels that the market has changed, and it has. Post-pandemic, things are different than they used to be. But companies are still hiring. And I think the key thing to remember here, is that semantic search is really been powered because of the changes of large language models that happened just a short, 2, 3 years ago. And the technology for those language models are getting better and better and better, meaning then that when that recruiter or that hiring manager sits down to put together a prompt, well, guess what? Now they're going to get better results. The pattern recognition is going to be better. The system is going to try to understand the professional you are and infer based on all of the signals that you give in your resume. A little bit of maintenance, so I'm going to sidebar for just a moment. The slides that I'm going through will be made available, and I will also be stopping periodically for questions. Given that we have so many people in attendance, I want to be open and honest that we can probably get to a couple of questions, when I pause. But in the slide deck that I will share, I also took the time to put together an FAQ based on the slides that I shared, as well as commonly asked other questions that you can take a look at your own leisure later. So I will be sharing that in chat so that way you can have access to that. So I think the biggest takeaway here, when you take a look at how these two systems work, keyword search looks for words, semantic search looks for patterns. But here's the thing that I think you need to understand as you submit your resume, as you submit your resume for the 50th time or the 100th time, right? Because I mean, we saw some folks, as they were logging on, sharing, how many applications that they've done. Well, if that company is utilizing semantic search, what that means is that that tool is looking at and ingesting everybody's resume at scale, at speed. And here's what that means from a practical perspective. And this is the key takeaway from this particular slide. And that is in semantic search, what the recruiter receives in return when they actually start the prompt. So they're going to start a prompt just as Laura outlined, and then they wait for the results. And the semantic search algorithm is going to return a set of results, and the recruiter can start to work right from there. That's the difference. The recruiter doesn't necessarily see how those results get given because it's a black box. And that's the key thing to understand about semantic search. And we're going to touch more on this a little bit later as we go through the slides. But I want to leave you with that from this particular slide, because in keyword search, the recruiter was involved earlier in the process. In semantic search, the recruiter is involved later in the process. So this is a great summary, and I'm going to pause here for just a minute. And Laura, can you see if there are any questions that just sort of pop out to you?
Yeah, I'm answering as they come in. So I think some people are. I'm going to show them how Callings tools uses semantics, the semantic search to find them jobs and also adapt their resume. Because some people are like, well, I'm not sure how to change my resume to make it more appealing to demonstrate that I have patterns. So I think the easiest way to answer that is just for me to show some of the tools.
And so that's so I appreciate everyone asking that. So the good news is that as we continue on with the presentation, we're going to dive into some specific details. So I've created a fictional candidate for us to take a look at together. And so you can then see the lens through which semantic search will view that specific candidate. So I think that will answer at least some of the questions that have been popping up in chat. Anything else, Laura?
Nope, that's good for now. Basically, your main point is that you're telling a story and it's interpreting a story, not just keywords. Yep.
All right. So here's what I think is so important. And I want to give you some sense of scale, because even though I'm going to give specific examples, I'm going to talk about the professional summary and I'm going to talk about in experience. Here's the deal. Semantic search will look at the resume altogether. So back when I was recruiting, I did a lot of med device and biotech recruiting, and I would often hire for scientist ones. So early career, entry-level scientist roles. And depending upon when I posted the role, it was not uncommon for me to get 300 or so applications. And in the days of keyword search, the reality is that I would do a search, that would hopefully winnow down that list of 300 to maybe get it to a much more manageable 50 to 60. And even then, that's quite a big list. And the reality is that I didn't even go through that 50 to 60. I
Yep.
probably looked at the top 10, maybe the top 20. And even doing that, that's probably a good 3 to 5 cans of Red Bull, right? It took me a long time to do that. Guess what? In semantic search, 300 resumes for a scientist one can be done in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
90 seconds. And so it really shifts how work gets done. So the recruiter is not upstream, the recruiter is downstream as it relates to looking at resumes. So in this example that I just gave you, where I had a list of 300, I winnowed it down to 60 and maybe took a look at the top 10, semantic search is going to give me, based on the prompt that I give it, it's going to itemize for me and rank the people based on the criteria that I give, the best candidates that fit. And if I say, give me 10, give me 15, give me 20, that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to give me that short ranking list like that. So let's take a look under the hood. We've got a professional summary here. Sarah is a project manager. And I'll let everyone take a look at the screen here and just sort of take a time. So keyword search is going to pick up the following things. Semantic search is going to read and infer from this professional summary who it thinks Sarah is. But let's pause for a moment on keyword search. Because here's the deal. Keyword search, and this is an optimal outcome. And the reason why I say it in that way is Laura alluded to it at the very beginning, because keyword search is a little bit like keyword bingo. You are attempting to guess what the recruiter is looking for. But there's also another variable that I think is so important to understand. Not every recruiter is equally skilled at Boolean searches. Because if we take a look at Laura's background, I'm quite sure she's better at Boolean search than I am. And so guess what? She's going to get better results. And so that's the variable that you as a job seeker need to think about. It's the human variable. And so that's what it means for keyword search. For semantic search, you don't have to worry in this way. Let's say that you, and this is something that Laura already alluded to, let's say that you have a different title than is a typical industry title. Semantic search is going to be able to infer meaning from the other signals that you've given in your resume that this is who you likely are. That's the key to understand the difference between keyword search and semantic search. Semantic search is going to be a little bit more absolute. It's going to be a better job at inferring. So it's removing the variability of unevenly skilled recruiters in the process. So let's take a look at the most recent experience. So once again, the same sort of logic holds true. And this time what'll happen is that let's say that Sarah here makes it past, my search. I go, Sarah looks pretty good. I then, have the hiring manager take a look at it. And the hiring manager is going to have more skill and experience at looking at this than I am. And they're going to be able to come up with more of these optimal results that you see in white. But still, based on what Sarah chose to share, even in keyword search, there are a couple of things that are missing. But semantic search, because remember, a human hasn't looked at Sarah's resume yet. So semantic search, those are the things that semantic search is going to be looking at. And what it is attempting to do, it is attempting to triangulate your identity based on the signals that you're giving it. The more signals you give, the more confident it will be in triangulating your identity. And so when you leave things out, such as, large companies, small, etc., all of those other things that you see there in red, it doesn't make it impossible to triangulate. It just makes it harder to triangulate. And this is going to come into play as we continue on in our presentation, as you'll see. So here's the deal. Sarah's resume, you know, isn't bad. And I would suggest for all of you on the call that if the resume that you're using has ever gotten you an interview, even once, it's a good resume. Okay? Because the job of the resume is to get an interview. And so you can look at it as a sales process, right? You've got your resume at the top. If the resume gets you an interview, that's great. If the interview gets you an offer, all the better. And if the offer gets you starting to work, obviously that's the goal. But I think the thing to really remember here, and I'm going to harp on this throughout the presentation, is that we're not all the way to semantic search yet. It's typically deployed at the enterprise level. So LinkedIn has semantic search. It's called 360 Brew, and it is only available to those companies that pay for LinkedIn Recruiter.
Mhm.
And so what that means is that you got to be found, and then you have to be categorized, or your identity has to be triangulated with a certain level of confidence. Because what semantic search is that it builds a mathematical profile of what good looks like. It takes a look at your resume and information and builds a mathematical profile of you, and it attempts to compare the two. And the closer it can get to saying that this looks like a project manager, then it's going to be able to categorize you effectively. And then it gets down to how it will rank you. But here's the problem is that if it's not able to categorize you, you're never going to actually even get into the ranking bucket. And then if you don't get into the ranking bucket, well, guess what? Laura and I and other recruiters, we're not going to see you
Yeah.
at all. And here's the hard part. We won't know why, right? We're just going to get the data set that semantic search gives us, and that's what we're going to be working off of. So let's let's change things around a little bit. Let's instead think about how can we make what we share signal rich? And we can do so by following what I refer to as verbs, noun, and proof. I'll let you take a look at it, but here's the thing that I think is so critical to understand is that ultimately what the system wants is they are going to anchor on nouns first because those are clear, concrete, and easily identifiable. And it's going to be looking for proof. Now, I recognize that not every role is going to relate to dollars and cents, but as you can see in the example here in Sarah's role as a project manager, you've got a number, right? Reduced average client onboarding time by 30%. And so one sentence is doing three different jobs in helping triangulate your identity. But the good news is it's not just for semantic search. It's also for the human. Because when you do get to the point to where you're in that ranked set, the human now has something to anchor on. Because the human is going to look to, as Laura said in her prologue, that, hey, if I'm looking for this global role, I'm going to want to see that this person has done those things before. And so they're going to be looking for something like led or managed, and then the proof, global delivery of X, whatever that might be. So I think that the big takeaway here is that even though semantic search creates a different challenge than what we've experienced holistically or historically, excuse me, I think that there is value in it from this way. If you put together a compelling career story, something that has coherence, something that the system can read and says, I see this person, worked at company A and started off as a level one, then went to a level two, and then became a manager. That story is semantic catnip because it allows the system to categorize you, to triangulate your identity, and surface you with confidence as it relates to what the recruiter or the hiring manager is looking for. And I think that means then that you could have the director of first impressions, as Laura said, and you can be confident that the system is going to be able to infer that you're a receptionist. So you don't have to get involved in keyword bingo any longer. You don't need to keyword stuff. Or, I'm sure all of you have tried it one time, if you're honest, because I know I did, and that is putting keywords, making the point size really small and turning the color to white. I'm sure we've all done it. Well, maybe not all, but I know I've tried it. And you don't have to engage in those sorts of things to be able to game the system. Because remember, the system today, semantic search, is looking for a story. So if there's any one takeaway, and I'm going to leave it on this slide a little bit, because even though you can get a copy of this, I will make sure that, I'll share the URL at the end. But if there's anything that you want to take your phones out and take a photo of, it's this. The top three, discovery, categorization, and ranking, that's how semantic search works. So it really asks, are you in the right neighborhood? So if I'm looking for a project manager, it needs to decide whether your profile belongs in the results at all. It's either this way or that way. It's binary. You're in the pool or you're not. And you do have the ability to influence this. The second is categorization. So we go from are you in the right neighborhood to which house are you in? What type of program manager are you? And this is where making sure that you have specific signals, all that supporting information that we've been talking about that allows the system to triangulate who you are. It needs to be able to place you with a level of confidence that says, hey, you know what? Sarah is who she claims to be. And then the ranking, where do you sit in the room? And this is the thing that I've been harping on and talking about all presentation. You have the ability in discovery to affect whether or not you get found. You have the ability in categorization to affect where you may be ranked. However, when it gets to being ranked, you have no real understanding of who else has applied. In other words, who are the other candidates in that data set? And since that is opaque, that's a black box, you can't see it. There is not a reliable way to authentically say that if you improve your categorization, that you are always going to be ranked right in spot number one. That's not an accurate statement. But what you can do is you can really work hard on the categorization piece to make sure that you get ranked because the goal is to be in the room. Ideally, you want to be in the first chair in that room, but the goal is to be in the room. And here's again the whole deal with semantic search, and this is why it's different than keyword search. In keyword search, when I did a Boolean search and I got back a list of candidates, I'm doing the triaging, I'm filtering, I'm sorting, I'm doing the pattern recognition. That job is on me. those 300 scientist ones that I winnowed down to 60, that I took a look at the top 10 or the top 20, whatever the case may be. I'm the one who's going through and I'm doing the categorization. And then I'm doing the ranking. In semantic search, the recruiter is not involved in that. Now, the recruiter is going to apply their own heuristics to the output, whatever that might be, whether it's what they know from the hiring manager, the company culture, their own experience, and so on. But the output is a list that has been predetermined by the algorithm. So that's the key takeaway. So I'm going to pause here for just a couple of seconds and see if there are any questions, two, maybe three questions that we can answer.
Yeah, there's lots of questions, Wayne, about networking. There's lots of questions about resumes. I mean, the resume question is people saying several times that they've honed their resume, they've honed their resume, they've honed their resume. They're still not getting interviews. So I'm just gonna put it out there. Some AI tools, including ours, have led to an explosion of applications. So a year and a half ago, I might have gotten 100 applicants for a job, and now I might get 5,000. And a year from now, there may be 10,000. And guess what? A lot of them look alike because AI tools have made it so easy to apply. There's even chatbots that will apply for you 24/7. You put in the criteria and they just apply, apply, apply. So, what I say to people is yes, you want to know about semantic search and you want to use the tools on Callings to hone your resume and to apply. Because as Garrett says, if you don't apply, you're not going to get interviewed, right? So you have to apply. But don't rely exclusively on that. It's painful for me to meet so many people who spend 90% of their time applying for jobs and 10% networking. We need to change that because now and even more in the future, people are going to get interviews largely through their relationships, through networking. And you can get to know people because there's so much information now about people by researching them a little bit and finding out, did they write a blog that you read? Did they appear on a podcast? You can listen to the podcast and then say to them, hey, I heard your podcast. It was great. I have two follow-up questions. Can I call and ask you? And then you're building a relationship rather than just saying, hey, Wayne, I know you work at the company that I want to work for. Will you refer me for this job? Right? Because you don't have a relationship with the person. So they're unlikely to say yes. Anyway, I think we're probably going to repeat our webinar on networking. One of the ones that we had that I think attracted the most people, like over 700 people, was networking for introverts. So we'll probably repeat that soon. Anyway, I'm not discounting anything Wayne's saying. It is important, but there are a lot of questions from people who have applied for a lot of jobs and just don't seem to be getting traction. So I would say we have to probably have more webinars on networking and getting people away from the screen and out into the world to meet each other. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, again, I think all of us as job seekers, particularly any of us who have been in the work world for a long time, we were brought up in an environment that is really, it doesn't exist anymore. And so the business changes that you're seeing about the migration to semantic search, the reality is that AI is being implemented in the hiring process because companies cannot keep up with the scale.
Yeah.
And it also creates its own set of issues. So what can you do? So, like we've talked about the entire presentation, the system is asking different questions. But semantic search isn't fully the search standard of the day. So here's what I want you to think about and take away from this particular slide. You still want to balance out what you present and how you present. Think about it with these following questions. And essentially what you're attempting to do is you're attempting to make yourself more legible. You're attempting to make yourself where your identity can be triangulated, where you can be categorized. And so What's the logic of how semantic search works? It really is asking these three questions, right? And the thing that I think is so important is that it is coherence. Is your story consistent? Because again, what semantic search is attempting to do, it's attempting to validate that you are who you claim. And the more signals that you give it, the more patterns that you give it, the more it's able to complete its mathematical model against what it says that it needs to find relative to what it is that you have to offer. And so it's going to be looking for consistency. Now, to be clear, semantic search is not judging. It's not saying that, oh, this person has had a career break. Oh, this person's title is different. All of those signals, all of those details carry mathematical weight to a greater or lesser degree. And so it's looking for the closest approximation it can to the mathematical model that's been built for it as it relates to this is what a project manager looks like. And it's attempting to measure you against that model. And one of the ways you can help yourself is by ensuring that your resume and your LinkedIn are consistent. Not the same thing. Think of it as peanut butter and jelly, because that's a digital surface area that you can expand upon to give the system more nodes, more data points, more signals to infer your career story.
Wayne, can I add something to there that somebody just brought up? A woman named Clara Savage said, asked about the importance of commenting on people's articles and posts on LinkedIn. And I said, by all means, in capital letters, yes, yes, yes. I don't know if people have noticed this, but a lot of times somebody's LinkedIn post will get 80 likes, 100 likes, and only one person will comment. And yet, when you comment, the person who wrote the post gets a notification. So if that's somebody you want to work for or with, by all means, comment. And what you were saying earlier about your digital footprint, it's more than just your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So there's things about you digitally, things that you've written, things that you've commented on there that are going to show up in now, but especially in the future when it comes to semantic search. So the way that Philippe, our chief technology officer at Callings, explained it to me, he said, right now you have a 2-page resume. In the future, you're going to have 1,000. It's not, we like to think of a resume because we can picture it in our minds as two-dimensional. But imagine if there's a file about you that tells a story that is a combination of your master's thesis, your blog posts, your podcasts, your PowerPoint presentations, all of that in one place. And there'll be a semantic search of it all, and it will come up with here's a profile of Wayne for this particular job, and it'll be shaped in a way that is most applicable to the job. So that's where we're going in the future. And this is right now, we're just in the infancy of it. Sorry, Wayne, I didn't mean to
Not at all. Not at
go
all.
on too long.
So this is the final slide. And so let me start by giving you the URL that I promised. It is thecareercantina.com /get found, all one word. Thecareercantina.com, that's the name of my coaching practice. Thecareercantina.com /get found. That's all together.
Thank you, Wayne.
You bet.
So,
And the very last thing that I want to make sure that people understand is it's all about awareness. It is educating yourself on what are the tools that are being used to find you. As Laura well pointed out, semantic search is only going to get better. It's the worst that it ever is today. And then going forward, it's going to continue to get better as the models improve, as how people learn how to prompt get better. And you need to take a look at your digital brand as not just LinkedIn, not just a resume, but all of the things that you touch online. Because to Laura's point, to Philippe's point, they semantic search will look at you in the aggregate. And the more that you understand that, the more easy it will be to discover you, the more things that you say that are consistent between all of those nodes. I'm a project manager, I'm a recruiter, I'm a finance person. That's going to corroborate or allow the system to triangulate your identity to categorize you. That will help you ultimately with your ranking to be able to get to that output. Awareness is the lever. What you do with it is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Wayne. Can everybody see my screen? I'm going to spend some time now talking about the Callings platform. And I posted a few minutes ago how you can get a free trial. So type in www.callings.ai/Wayne, and you can sign up to test out Callings. I'm going to show you the way that Callings does 3 things that can help you with your job search and how it uses semantic search already. So the first thing it does is helps you learn about yourself. Discovery. What is it that I really want to do? And I find this particularly helpful as somebody who had to completely pivot away from global health and development recruiting about a year ago. So I started to think, what do I really know? What am I good at again? And Callings helped me get there. So the first thing it does is it has this questionnaire, says My Goals questionnaire. It'll take some time. There's 28 questions. I'm not going to click on it because your questions are going to be different than the questions that it comes up with for me. But the questions will relate to things like, do you like working with others? Do you want to be an individual contributor or do you want to be a manager? Do you want to be focused on a project internally? Do you want to be focused externally at, say, a consulting firm that advises clients? Those kinds of questions. And then
So,
once you,
so Laura, it
yeah.
doesn't seem like everyone is seeing your screen.
Oh, let me stop sharing and share again. Okay. What everybody should see is the screen that says Callings. Is it working now? Okay. So after you fill out that questionnaire, you're going to get a dream job description. And I love this because it's a creative way of reminding me what is it I want to spend my time doing. So when I went through this procedure, it came up with a job that doesn't exist, but Chief of Talent Acquisition for Global Health Innovators. It even made up a name of a company. And then it said, what you're going to spend your time doing is developing AI tech tools, training and capacity building, and leading the talent acquisition globally. So this was accurate for me. This is the kind of thing that I want to do. And I said to somebody earlier who said, someone said, I'm not quite sure exactly where I belong. I want to pivot. And I said, once you come up with this dream job description, you can paste this into a generative AI site with your resume and say, change my resume to match this job. This is the kind of job that I want, to get some ideas for how to shape your resume. Okay, going back to this, another thing I want to show you a tool is this market fit report. So if you're looking, if you say, oh my gosh, my industry is basically imploded, minded in global health, where can I go next? You can run what's called a market fit report, which will come up, take your resume and the skills that it extracts and figure out what are the growing industries and the kinds of companies that you can work for. So for me, it came up with within the health sector, HR technology companies, workforce development, some federal health contractors, right? And then from there, sample companies that I might want to work for. And one of the really cool things is you can click on these companies, view target company, and then create a speculative job, which is like a consulting gig that you can have to understand how could you add value to that company. And it can give some focus to your networking as well. If you end up networking with somebody at that company and you could help them. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to show you from the insights about how to learn about yourself is the brand elements. So again, once you fill out that questionnaire, it's going to come up with your pitch. It's easy to forget when you're job hunting that you have value and what you can do for other people. So this can remind you in 2 minutes, what are you? What can you do for me? Here's your summary. Here are some headlines that you might want to consider putting on LinkedIn. And then here, semantic search, the skills. So if it's true, if these are accurate, you make sure your LinkedIn profile contains these skills, because now you can incorporate your skills into your LinkedIn profile. Okay. That's a little bit about you and how you can get clarity through the tools on Callings about yourself. Once you're done with that, most people want to use it to find jobs. Here's a semantic search. You can see here I put in talent acquisition leader, the level, and I just wrote in plain English. I want to be in a health company or a global health organization. I want to make sure that it has offices in Africa. And so here's what it comes up with. Current jobs, right? And if they're not quite right, you can hide them. You can share them with other people. You can put them in your tracker. Once you've done that, you're going to get, once you sign up for your Callings account and you put in the kind of job that you want, you're going to start getting jobs through via email, or you can always go here to your Callings account and you can see them and add them to your tracker, right? So find matching jobs will get these for you. You'll read them and go, oh, that's not quite right. Don't show me that. And you're training the system. This one I might want, okay? Once you do that, you read through the jobs, and then I told you that Callings does 3 things. It gives you insight about yourself. The second thing it does is it helps you apply for jobs and prepare for interviews. So this is the really practical nuts and bolts parts of Callings. You can see right here when I click on the job, I don't know this organization, this company, by the way, Maris. It looks like it's a biotech or health company. It gives you a breakdown of where you're competitive for this job in the green, where you might want to brush up and improve. And then the red would be, things that you aren't quite right, don't match your experience. When you go under prepare, Callings, this again is using semantics search to come up with a resume for you and a cover letter from the resume that you put in the system. It's going to adapt it for this particular job. And what I like about this is you can go through it step by step and accept the changes or reject them and keep the original, right? You don't have to accept all. And it gives you under here the reasoning. So you can see here, I converted this role to a standard bullet format and highlighted, something in particular. And it's thinking like the recruiter and emphasizing what it is you should bring out. You can also describe here what kinds of changes you want. So make this 1 page. Again, in plain English, it's going to incorporate the changes that you want to see here. If this takes too long, I'm just going to abandon it. Okay, so here's the new resume that it came up with. This is going on to the 2nd page. Maybe it didn't do that. It says, I get it. I have to accept the other changes first before it'll allow me to do this. But you can write in here, I want to change the whole thing into French, and it'll change your resume into French. I'm going to continue that later. Couple people, actually a lot of people in the chat were asking questions that made me think we need to spend more time networking. Callings helps you do that. I'm going to say it again. It's important now to network. It's going to be even more important in the future when hiring managers and recruiters are getting thousands of resumes and they have to find a way to cut through it. So either you're going to be ranked as the top 5 for that job, or you're going to have to come in through the back door, through networking. And the way that Callings does this for you is unlike any other platform that's out there, which is we find people who are connected to this particular job at this particular company for you. And these are not necessarily people you're connected to on LinkedIn. So in my case, this company, Maris NV in Cambridge, Mass. I don't have any relationships there. I don't know anybody at this company. I've never heard of it. And it gave me, let's see, it gave me Marissa, a senior HR partner at this company. And it'll tell me here what I might have in common with Marissa. So you can read through this and see what you have in common. I also recommended to somebody in the chat who wasn't getting much traction that you can research Marissa. You can go to a place like ChatGPT and see, where has Marissa been speaking? Is there a conference that she went to? And I'm not, saying fabricate and make up a story that you were at the same conference as her, but let's say she was on a webinar. You can watch that webinar and then you can contact her and say, you had some good points at that webinar. I have a couple follow-up questions. And that can be your way to get a hold of Marissa. You can also click this button that says reach out, and you can open up LinkedIn, and LinkedIn will send from you to her a LinkedIn message. You paste it in. You can also email her. This is unlike anybody else out there. We come up with her email address for you. And you can open this up. It'll go straight into your email, or you can copy and paste her address. And then you can also have, here's some suggestions about what you might want to say to her. And again, you can change this and say, we're at the SHRM conference last month. And it will incorporate this into my note from Marissa saying, both of us were at the same conference last month. So you can see here, we both attended the same conference, right? And then it's helping you craft a message specifically for Marissa. So the people who wrote in the chat, there were a couple people who said they've applied for a lot of jobs and not gotten much traction. You might want to step back from applying and spend more time doing this kind of stuff, networking. Last thing quickly that I want to show you is that we help you prepare for interviews. So as we become even more robust in keeping information, this is going to get better. Right now, it's based on your resume. What are the kinds of interview questions you might be asked based on what the system knows about the company and the position? And based on you, how might you want to answer? So right now, it really only knows about my experience on my resume. But in the future, if we start dumping a lot of information there, like I can't wait for a day when I can take all of my folders, right, from past jobs that I've had, all the things that I've created and put it into one place. And then the system will distill it into very specific examples in response to projected interview questions. So that's where we're headed. I think it's going to become even more sophisticated. But for now, you'll see that the kinds of questions are more general, like, tell me about a talent acquisition strategy you created. It does know from my experience on my resume that I worked at CARE and an NGO called Living Goods. And so it referenced that in my suggested answer. So for now, that's what we have, and it's pretty cool. So I mentioned there's 3 things that Callings will do for you. So 1, helps you learn about yourself. 2, helps you apply for jobs. The final thing that I want to mention, we only have about 5 minutes left, is that Callings will help you brand yourself and get connected to people. So we've got this new cool tool called a calling card. Oh, it didn't work. Let me try one more time. The calling card is my action figure. This is a creative way of branding yourself and telling other people about you. So this is my action figure. I'm a global talent matchmaker. You can adapt this, but AI wrote this for me. What is it that distinguishes me? Some highlights about me, distilled into a couple of key points here, data-driven work, having worked in 90 countries or recruited in 90 countries for 6 organizations. And you can download the resume. So you can take this and you can hit share, and you can share this through your LinkedIn feed or through email to people. And it'll keep track of people who have introduced you, people who have forwarded it. It's just kind of a cool way to get you on people's minds. And then finally, we have a way to connect you with other people. So we have a couple of ways we do that. The coaching, the calling circle is every Monday. And there's a topic usually that we have to give it an anchor, like networking, but it's a way for you to connect with other people who are going through what you're going through. And we also have all of these webinars that you can watch whenever you want, and you can sign up for future webinars, which is why we posted the question at the beginning, what is it that you need help with? So that's it about callings. And so
I
now we
saw
have 5 minutes left, and I was hoping that there might be a couple questions we either want to voice over and talk about as a group, or if people want to stay on, Wayne and I will stay on for another 15 minutes too, for people to ask their personal questions. We can turn off.
So a couple of questions that I saw in chat, Laura, if you could answer. So one, once again, what is the URL for the free 30 days? And then after the 30 days, what is the cost per month? And then I also saw another question about Europe. Does the Callings AI tool work in Europe?
Callings works everywhere. So we have tested it in the Democratic Republic of Congo, like looking for jobs in very obscure places, and also looking for jobs at various levels. So truck drivers, compared to people with MBAs and PhDs. Yes. And I don't know if Garrett is still on, but Garrett, if you're on, if you can come on video.
Yeah,
This is
let me answer. I can answer a few of those questions. First of all, if you go to callings.ai/Wayne, you will get 30-day access if you register now to all the premium features of Callings.ai. You should be aware that Callings.ai is always free for finding jobs, tracking jobs in your tracker and organizing your job hunt and applying to jobs. So we never take that away, and your data is always yours. You always be able to access your tracker. So the AI features include some of the things Laura showed you, the calling card. Your original calling card is also free. It's just if you use the AI tools to improve it. And so you can try all of that, all of you, at callings.ai/Wayne, and that will give you 30-day access when you register.
so the question about where are our jobs sourced?
Ah, so we have a job system that sources jobs from across a number of sources. We are in the process of upgrading that system to over 10 million jobs, and most of those jobs will be sourced directly from hiring company sites, and that's rolling out as we speak. So we're getting our sources from everywhere we can find them, and our goal is to not provide you job sources from other job boards, which often gets you on this internet jump between sources, and get you directly to the hiring company website where they're posting the job.
Great.
And what's the cost after the trial ends?
So after the trial ends, Callings for all the features is $30 a month. And we offer steep discounts for 6 month and 1 year packages. So the 6 month package is about a third off, so about $120 for 6 months, which is about the average length of a job hunt, and $179 for a year, which is the average length of a job hunt if you're a senior white collar worker.
Some people find that sobering and surprising, but that's the new reality.
Yeah, I'm not the person that invented that. It's important that you know that so that you don't expect to get a job in 2 weeks and then beat yourself up. It takes time. And, as Wayne and Laura showed you all, there's a system that you're entering as you look for your next career opportunity. And the good news is you're learning how to game it to help you.
Yep. The frustration shared about how many job listings are outdated, and if they, Indeed and LinkedIn in particular, for LinkedIn, a lot of times, depending on the company, but recruiters have to remove them, and same for Indeed. And so Indeed actually gets paid by the click, so they have an incentive to keep jobs up there for a long time. So most of our jobs come directly from the career sites of the company. So you can be sure that when the recruiter takes them down, they won't show up on your list of open jobs anymore. Yeah.
I want to point out too that we are job agnostic. We have a Chrome plugin that allows you to bring jobs in from LinkedIn, Indeed, and other job boards. And you can add jobs manually that you find as well to put into your tracker. And all of our AI tools will run on any jobs you find. So we'll use semantic matching to look at your resume and score any job from any source that you add to our tracker to give you all the tools and capabilities that you saw today.
Yeah, Maya seems frustrated that we've got machines talking to machines, that humans are missing. Humans are still involved, maybe less so. So that's why we talked about making your resume understandable, readable, recognizable by machines, because the reality is that there will be machines looking at you. Yeah.
And that's why networking is so important.
Yep.
Because that's the moment you actually get seen by another real human being, and it increases your odds something like 400%.